How's it going, guys? Winner Kills here. Welcome to a brand new feature match. Here in round 2, we've got Salamangreat versus Pendulums. So, two decks recently, hit in the ban. Well, not recently, I would say, but, hit on the ban list. Definitely lower on the power ranking scale, I would say, than before, obviously. But both still viable decks. Competitively viable decks, as we've seen. And some tournament results, Salamangreat winning YCS Utrecht, all that stuff. You guys have seen it before, but yeah. So Pendulums going first here, winning the die roll, getting started with the Magical Citadel, and then playing that Cerberus, and then of course using Cerberus's effect to go grab a mythical beast monster from the main deck. Not grabbing Jackal King here though, grabbing the regular Jackal, and then just going to use its effect and go ahead and destroy it to place a counter onto that Citadel. And then it looks like he's going to go ahead and use the Jackal King's effect here to bring out the mini Jackal. And then going to go for the normal summoner here, the Spellbook Magician. The Spellbook engine, I believe, kind of really finding its way back into Pendulums. I did play Mythical, Endymion Pendulum for a little while, last year. And I found that using the Spellbook engine in there was absolutely fantastic. I played a bit of a bigger Spellbook engine than I believe most people were playing, but I think it's great to see that the Spellbook engine is finding, at least in bigger, quantities in Pendulum decks. Obviously, because the synergy is there. You have all the spell cards added in, the searchability off Blue Boy and Secrets. You're getting counters off them, and here you're getting draws off of Knowledge by sending that Blue Boy to the graveyard, to draw 2. And right now, just trying to load up his field spell with counters and draw cards in the process. Trying to hunt down that one of Servant. So resolving the desires there. Hopefully the Servant wasn't banished. But obviously that is an option. Now going for Upstart Goblin. So getting even more counters placed here. The Jackal getting 2. And then Endymion's Citadel sucking up more counters and acting as sort of a well for counters. The Endymion Field Spell is one of those cards that I've also always liked in this deck. It really doesn't do much on its own per se, but I feel like it adds to the deck's grind game now, especially with cards like Electromite being gone and Servant being a hit to 1. The deck's ability to sort of bounce back and make more powerful plays is sort of hindered by those cards being where they are in the ban list now, I feel. And the Citadel allowing you to hold massive amounts of counters to pretty much make any card scale wise that you would draw live, whether it be Reflection, Magister, or the Mighty Master himself, as he's going to grab here off of that Spell Power Mastery. And gonna go ahead and probably play another card into the scale here. It's gonna be the Astrograph, not the Astrograph, the Chronograph. I always get those two mixed up. But Chronograph for the Time Gazer, I believe. Getting that played into the scale. And also in the process, getting more counters. And then going to place the Mighty Master. And then Pendulum Summon for not 1, but 2. 2 Pendulum monsters. One being the Mighty Master and the other being another Jackal. So essentially with this board, just playing the game where basically you're just putting out these big boss monsters that Pendulum can easily tutor out, and with a plethora of counters on the field to work with, thanks to the Citadel and thanks to all those draw spells. So looks like he'll be starting though, our Salamangreat player, starting with that Forbidden Chalice. I love Forbidden Chalice more and more in the meta, because it's just in some cases a better impermanence when dealing with boards, because you can use multiple. You don't have to worry about having no cards to use it from your hand, I believe being the biggest benefit to it. So he'll be able to turn off one of the Jackal Kings. He's not going to respond to that with the Mighty Master. Still going to, play it safe and, resourceful with the amount of interruptions that he has in the form of a spell and trap negation from the Mighty Master and the other Jackal King having counters on it as well from, I believe, the Chalice that was just played. And then we're going to resolve the Flame Buffalo now after getting into the Balinks, drawing some cards here. And I believe now deciding on a discard. The Buffalo is draw 2, discard 1, is it not? It might just be draw 2. It might be just hallucinating. But either way, going for the Salamangreat Circle now. And of course, he will have the opportunity to respond with the Mighty Master, but he's not going to, and instead he'll gladly take those counters from that circle and add it onto his Citadel and his Jackal. So yeah, you don't have to discard for Buffalo. I mean, once you draw the 2 cards, you discard first, and then you draw 2 cards. So I was getting it mixed up there. My apologies for any confusion. But now if you're Salamangreat, you really got to try to focus on breaking this board. There's just a lot of big monsters, and as my friend on the left would like to mention, that if you put up any monster with over 2,300 attack, Salamangreat starts to sweat quite a bit. He will attest to that statement a lot. I'm sure he might even mention it in the comments below of this video. But yeah, and if when you guys are watching this, me, my friend there on the left, and another friend should be at an OTS, hopefully doing well. Who knows? So wish us luck, I guess. But now summoning out the Foxy by discarding a Spinny. Pretty optimal target there. Now that obviously Mirage Stalio is gone, you have some board breaking potential being removed from the deck's arsenal. But nonetheless, the Foxy will clear the Endymion in the scale. So not too worried about it getting any sort of effect when it's destroyed. The only effect that would activate if the one on the field was destroyed. I believe I've had a counter. But still, there's a lot of big monsters on the field that the deck is going to have a hard time getting through. So resolving 1 desires here, at least trying to. And I believe at this point in the combo, if you see your opponent has already invested this many cards into the play and has only gotten to Balinks and a Foxy with really not much of a follow-up. I mean, he can't go for Stalio at this point with that Spinny in the graveyard. You know this, obviously. So maybe you stop an extra influx of cards coming to his hand, which is what he is going to do. He's going to negate with the Mighty Master and bounce back the field spell, and he's going to go ahead and play another Pot of Desires. Absolute madman, because I believe it's negating the activation, and much like Shaddoll Fusion, you know, if it gets warning, you can activate another Shaddoll Fusion because it says you can only activate 1 Pot of Desires per turn. So if that activation gets negated, you have the opportunity to activate another one, but of course at the cost of banishing another 10 cards. So he's already down 20 in just straight paying for costs for Pot of Desires. So I really do hope at this point it was at least worth it. I mean, you at least have to try, because I feel like he's not totally out of it just yet. Still has the opportunity to the battle phase, still has other opportunities to go into the extra deck. Cards like, you know, Transcode Talker with Update Jammer could be pretty potent. And I believe he's also teching the Prohibit Snake into his build. I believe this might have been like one of the first times he was actually experimenting with this card. Me and another friend actually convinced him to play it, and he actually ended up really liking the card in the main deck, so I'm glad to report that. Prohibit Snake being a pretty decent card in Salamangreat. But also playing cards like Security Dragon in the extra deck as well to allow some forms of removal. You also have cards like Avermax, which could be brought out. Who could forget the Update Transcode, you know, as forms of removal in the battle phase at least. So it looks like he's going to bring out the Spinny, and he's going to link off the Foxy and the Spinny into that Update Jammer. And, you know, being locked into Cyberse, I feel like, is what, in most cases, makes this deck a little bit harder to pilot. I mean, granted, you don't always get locked into Cyberse in some cases. But, like, you know, for example, going for like, Transcode Talker, to use his revival effect, you know, you're only, like, have to have summoned Cyberse that turn. And sometimes you do get restricted into using, like, fire monsters. I guess that was really more so with Mirage Stalio. But regardless, I feel like this deck is easier turn 1, but once turn 3 comes around, you know, just trying to establish a board and kill the opponent is extremely hard to do. I'm sure most of you have heard people say that about Salamangreat. I feel like that is still true to this day. So now having linked off the update and I believe the Balinks for Transcode, he has the opportunity to use its revival effect if he wants. But of course, that will allow the other Jackal King an opportunity to respond. So he's already burned the spell negate. He's already burned 1 monster negate, but still has 1 more monster negate. So he's going to try to push it, you know, into the battle phase here and burn that last monster negate with a Prohibit Snake, which basically I believe you can discard when your Cyberse monster battles to basically bounce whatever monster it's attacking. So yeah, at the start of the damage step, if your Cyberse Link monster battles an opponent's monster, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, return that opponent's monster to the hand. So the Jackal will have the opportunity to negate. Otherwise, it would have gotten bounced back to the hand by the result of the Prohibit Snake, but it still will hit the graveyard, which is key because Prohibit Snake does have a really good graveyard effect in of its own. But so now basically all interruptions burnt out this point, now resolving the effect of the transcode to revive the other Balinks, and then relinking using the field spell now here towards the very end of his combo. And as you can see, not too many cards left in the main deck at this point, of course, after resolving 2 desires in this turn. After one getting negated, the activation being negated, and now, following up with another desires. And then here, deck thinning even more using the Gazelle, trying to see if there's any possible way to get that relink effect, to get that trap set back to his field. But he was forced to use the relink effect of the Balinks, or with the Balinks here now, after both the Jackal negates have been resolved, because you don't want to have that Gazelle get negated, mid-combo, because that's going to make things even harder to play through. So now going to link the Gazelle and the Balinks, and use Security Dragon to bounce that Jackal King back to the hand. So yeah, more removal here. Playing through 3 interruptions, and still ending on the board that with clearing everything, I guess, and going through as many cards as he did, still only ending on Avermax. I feel like that's at least admirable at this point. Avermax could prove to be an actual very, very hard card to get over, but then again, you got to take into account the fact that Mighty Master of Magic himself is a card, and if he summons himself out of the scale, that's non-targeting destruction in the form of a spell being activated. If he doesn't have any stop for that, could be game over, because Avermax cannot do anything about that in terms of defense, since he was not summoned using IP or IP Masquerena, whatever you want to call it. So sort of just left to have Avermax hold down the fort with having resolved a bunch of effects this turn, I should say. But yeah, Prohibit Snakes, though, getting back to that card, its other effect basically says while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish. It says if your Cyber monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sent to the graveyard while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish 1 card from your graveyard, then target level 4 or lower Cyber monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. So at any point, if any of his Cyber monsters destroy a monster by battle and sends to the graveyard, while it's in the graveyard, you can just freely banish any card in your grave. So per se, if you wanted to just banish the desires, you could, to add back something per se like Gazelle. So Prohibit Snake doing quite a lot, especially in a format now where Winda is such a really, really good card, and Salamangreat being, I feel like, the deck that is, hindered the most by this new Shaddoll influx into the meta, with Winda being as prevalent as it is, and sort of locking most decks out of playing if they don't have the correct out. But Prohibit Snake, of course, being searchable by Synapse Mining, makes it very accessible, and just normal summoning a card like, Foxy, and running it over, and then bouncing it back with a Prohibit Snake is just really, really strong. So looks like our Pendulum player has just passed after deciding it's best to just hold on to his cards at this point, perhaps knowing that he's not in any danger of getting OTK'd, at least with the monsters that he still has on the field. So his opponent's still going to have to be very careful about what he activates here, because there is a monster negate live, and of course still a spell and trap negate, since all those counters that were on Citadel the previous turn are now on the Mighty Master, so the Jackal can take from those if need be. Gonna go into the battle phase, not use Avermax's effect here, because if he does, Jackal King will have a chance to respond, and thus negating the Avermax, which you definitely don't want to do. But since he has destroyed a monster by battle with one of his Cybers monsters, he's going to use the effect of Prohibit Snake in the graveyard, banishing the desires, adding back a level 4 lower Cybers, of course, in the form of Salamangreat Gazelle. So now having more cards to work with from essentially nothing. A card that baited out a negate last turn and is now helping to recycle some more resources. So now going to normal summon the Balinks, or not Balinks, but, well, might as well be normal summoning Balinks, but normal summoning Spinny, linking off for Balinks, summoning Gazelle, checking the deck to see if there's any last targets. There is none. Confirming that with his opponent. Everything has either been banished or already in the graveyard. But I believe did get to a copy of Roar in the grave, so has the opportunity to potentially try and get that back off of a link summon if he can make it happen. So he's going to use Spinny, and then he's going to link all 3 of those into Yugioh, shuffle that Pendulum scale back into the deck, now relinking into another Yugioh, and going to use the reset effect of the Roar. So now getting an interruption here, Battle phase exhausted, so there's not much you can do. You just really got to hope he doesn't have Mighty Master Magic at this point, because there's really not a whole lot you can do. I mean, you have the Roar for it, essentially, because I believe Roar does negate monster spell or trap effects. But if he has any sort of way to bait out the other effect, you know, that could really prove to be sort of lethal. Lethal? I don't know. I'm just making up words here, I guess. So you're going to use the effect of Basilisk to basically put a card back in from the scale to redraw. And he's going to have Garuda, which is insane here, because it says if you have no cards in your other Pendulum zone, you can target one other spell trap on the field, destroy both it and this card. So basically acting as an MST, which is huge because that's going to force out that Roar. And at this point, if he has a Mighty Master in his hand, he can just play it in the scale and blow up pretty much everything on his field, and there's not going to be anything he can really do about it as sort of a rebuttal. So he's going to play Jackal in the scale now. That'll put a counter on the Citadel, and he'll summon out the Cerberus and play Spell Power Mastery, which is just insane here. Seemingly having all the cards he needs, and going for Mighty Master Magic, and that's going to put 2 counters onto the Cerberus, which will allow him to use the effect to basically target a monster and banish it, and then gain the attack of equal to the monster that it banished until the end of the next turn. So it's going to gain 23 if he decides to banish the Yugioh, because he can't target Avermax still at this point, which is still pretty clutch. If he could be targeted right now, he'd be pretty much really out of luck. But yeah, so going to banish Yugioh, unfortunately, so that'll gain more counters, or will gain more attack, I should say. And then playing another card in the scale, and then summons the Endymion and blows everything up, and then can still go into battle phase here. Even if he's going to shuffle back another Mighty Master, it still puts plenty of damage on the board, which I actually think might be game, because that Cerberus did gain quite a bit of attack from its effect. And now we're going to head into game 2, and I want to remind you guys that if you are interested in helping support the channel, please check out our sponsor, Imperium Duelist. Link to their website down in the description below. Provider of amazing 2-player cloth playmats, sleeves, dice, calculator cases, and their new deck box too, which is absolutely amazing. Check them out down in the description below, and you can use that discount code WINNERKILLS10 off at checkout to save 10% off your entire order and help support the channel in the process. And if you guys find yourself buying anything on TCG Player, and you want to help support the channel just by doing that, you can just by clicking that affiliate link down in the description below and just shopping and checking out using that link. A small portion of the revenue will go to me to help support the channel and doing what I do, so feel free to check that out, and also consider hitting the join button. But after that game 1, a pretty long and grindy game 1, Salamangreat, I feel like it ran out of gas very quickly in their last few turns. Just trying to clear all those big monsters is very rough. And just, the double desires, probably, half his deck essentially gone because of one Endymion negate. And it's very rough to try to play through at that point. And now getting started here, going first in game 1, you obviously want to try to go first to try to set up a classic Salamangreat board. Multiple interruptions in the form of traps and hand traps to go along with it. But the board starting very interesting at this point. Going for double Balinks and having to pass there, unfortunately. I believe a copy of Droll and Lockbird and Prohibit Snake in the hand of our Salamangreat player. And must be nice, the one of Servant in the scale, and the mythical institution being played. And then the chronograph being played as well. So that's already 2 counters up onto the Servant. That is just really rough to see at this point. I mean, we saw at the end of game 1 just a whole myriad of cards, getting into the hand of our Pendulum player, just play after play. The Garuda, the Basilisk into the Garuda, into the Jackal King for the Cerberus, and into the Mastery for the Endymion. Now going to Pendulum summon 3 here right off the bat. Reflection being one of the 3, 2 of them being reflections, and a chronograph. Just putting out big monsters and using both the reflections here to bounce both of the Balinkses because of their on summon effects, I believe, which is absolutely insane. I mean, I feel like opening double reflection isn't the greatest, but he had the rest of the cards to go along with it, I guess, which is just really good for him, I guess. And it says if this card is special summon, you can target one card your opponent controls and one card you control with a spell counter, and then basically return that opponent's card and your card to the hand, and then place the same number of spell counters on this card. So I believe counters will go to each reflection as they have activated sort of in sequence together. And since they are level 7, it's going to overlay into Absolute Dragon and then link all of those into Psyframe Lord Lambda. And that'll bring out the Vortex Dragon with the Lambda. And main phase 2 and placing back that Servant. Putting up 1 interruption here, which isn't a lot specifically for Pendulums, but at this specific point in the game, with as rough as an opening as we saw, could be potentially enough. So going into Balinks, using the Prohibit Snake, and still got a Vortex Dragon staring you down here. Any spells that he plays will essentially be helping the Pendulum player fuel an OTK for the next turn by putting counters on that Servant. I mean, not intentionally, it's just sort of a product of, you know, playing at this point. Looks like he does have a spell to play. It's Foolish Burial, it looks like, but hesitant on playing it. I believe he has another Prohibit Snake in hand as well as a Droll and Lock Bird. So he could potentially go into battle. Yep, and he's going to pitch another Prohibit Snake to potentially bounce the Vortex, which he's going to have to negate. Shuffles one back from the extra deck face up back into the deck. So 2 Prohibits in the graveyard now. I think he only plays 2 copies too, so he got very unlucky here in this case and opened 2 of. And yeah, he's got Droll and Foolish in hand. There's really not a whole lot you can do there. That was his opening hand, which looks pretty rough in comparison to what our Pendulum player saw here in game 2, but it is what it is at the end of the day. So Pendulum taking the match in sort of a swift 2-0 game 1, very, very grindy, but nonetheless, Pendulums taking the match here 2-0. Were you guys sort of surprised at that outcome? Did you guys think that maybe Salamangreat was going to take it? I was kind of expecting, like, if Salamangreat, you know, I feel like Salamangreat can still be a little bit more consistent than Pendulum nowadays, because I don't know, I just feel like it's still a pretty good deck to begin with. Both of them are pretty decent decks, but yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like if you did, and of course, as always, when to kill, signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one.